Hello, Pensacon 2022. I didn't yell at this. There's not a piece. I'm just quiet. Relax. We are here with Jeffery Kramer, and we're gonna spend a little time with you, ask you a few questions, talk about your career.
I look forward to it.
So I promised I would not start with Jaws question. I love Jaws. We all love Jaws, and especially Jaws too, because it was filmed here. And so
it was.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Oh, sorry.
So,
Navarre Beach.
Navarre Beach, not too far from here. So
that is awesome.
It is in our hearts.
I get it.
So I was looking you up and doing some extra research on you, and you produced the Bob Dylan 30th anniversary.
No.
You know you did not?
No, but there's a story in
Please tell me, because I want to know.
Because Bob Dylan's manager is named Jeffery Kramer. And one time that we were doing McBeal, and we had all we were, you know, when there was a lot of music at McBeal. Everybody begged us. Barry White, Al Green. We had great talent on that show that came and sang. And Tommy Mottola, who's this big record executive and ran a huge record company, called me up and he says, "Jeff, how's Bobby?" Who? How's Bobby? He's looking for the other Jeffery Kramer. And yesterday, this is true, I got a call from a woman who works for a producer to try to see if I could connect her to Paul Simon. I don't know Paul Simon. It's the other Jeffery Kramer.
So you should have found the other Paul Simon. You're like, oh yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Well, it's funny because it's on your IMDb, and I was like, oh, well, that's interesting.
I know, I didn't put it.
Oh, well, of course not, but it's like, because those things are sometimes fan generated. And so it was just real interesting. And I was like, well, this is, Alley Bill and the practice, and then you got this little weird nugget here. And I'm like, well, maybe that's how I got.
Oh boy. Robert Zimmerman. That's Dylan's real name.
Dylan's real name, absolutely.
Funny.
So, tell us about how did Jaws happen for you?
My mother was born on Martha's Vineyard. And there's a great local paper called the Vineyard Gazette. And I read that there was casting for a major motion picture. So I called my agent in New York and I said, "Can you get me in on this?" And he did. And I flew to Boston. I flew with a friend of mine who went up to also meet Stephen. And I sat in the room with Stephen and we just talked. He didn't ask me to read anything. I don't think there was a script. And I walked out of there, and the only time in my life I've ever felt this way, I walked out of there and I said to the guy I was with, I said, "I'm going to get this." I never did this in my life, ever. And 10 days later, I was doing a commercial in Virginia and got a call, "It's yours." But who knew? During the shoot, we were over budget. We were supposed to be gone before the beginning of the summer. We ended up through most of the summer there. And we all thought that we were going to pull the plug, cancel it, whatever. Who knew that almost 50 years later, we'd be sitting here and people would pay me to sign an autograph? It's unbelievable.
It is the first blockbuster.
It was.
It's been traded without.
And in point of fact, Jaws 2 is still one of the greatest money-making sequels.
Absolutely.
And I became friendly with Jean Oswart, who directed this. I got married in his house. He's just a wonderful guy. And he came in and, sometimes we'd have 3 full units shooting on the beach out by Navarre Beach. Mm-hmm. And everybody's ready, and in the background you'd see a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier come by. And in those days, there's nothing you could do. You couldn't green screen it out. You just had to wait till it passed. And it was so cold here, kind of like now, that we chewed ice cubes so that you wouldn't see the condensation from our breath. And the joke always was, if any of us ever went to prison, you got 6 months off of any jail term just for doing Jaws 2.
So what are some areas of working on the first Jaws you have?
Oh, I loved Murray Hamilton. I used to share a dressing room with him, and he kept a bottle of gin in my boot. He loved to drink. And one night, Murray's walking home, and he says, "Hey, here, kitty," and a skunk sprayed him.
Oh.
Oh my God, and we couldn't get him to go up to his hotel room. He stayed on the couch, and that hotel smelled of skunk.
Oh.
Eventually, he went up and bathed in tomato juice, but unbelievable.
Oh, crazy. How was Steven's directing style?
He knew what he wanted, but he didn't tell you as an actor much. He left it up to you. And, you know, he casts all three guys in the boat. They all had a different style, and he just let them be, you know, themselves. And Shaw was kind of an interesting guy. No one ever saw him much because he only came in to shoot. Evidently, there was some tax problems if he stayed too long in the country and he had to leave. But it was kind of fun. And for me, my mother was born on Martha's Vineyard. So I have family there and my cousins. And to be there and do this, and I ran a theater there for many years called the Vineyard Players, where I produced it and played all the best young men's roles. So people got to know our work, and if they liked it, they'd hire us all winter in New York. So it was kind of very cool.
This sounds wonderful, actually. And so from what's it like a crazy? I mean, no one saw. You said no one saw one becoming such a hit.
No one ever saw it. And when it really became a hit, when we were in California, I knew a guy who was an usher at one of the theaters. And every night, you know, because you knew exactly when Ben Gardner's head was going to come out of the thing, he'd let us in, and just to watch the whole audience lean back was just unbelievable. And what a feeling that was. It was so good.
So how did you get approached for two?
Well, this is an interesting story because I was hired to do two and play Hendrix. And I showed up here, and it was directed by a guy named John Hancock then. And all of a sudden, there's two deputies, me and a character actor, a big, heavy character actor named Marshall Ephraim. Seemed like a nice guy. Gave him all of the good fun lines, and it wasn't what I had done initially, and I left. I said, I don't want to do this. Within 3 weeks, he was fired, the director. And Jean Swart came in and said, wait, what happened to the guy who did the original? I liked him. And they brought me back. And there was one deputy instead of two. And it was great to be here. You know, it was one of the longest shoots in film history in many ways, 6 months. Marriages of 20 years broke up. It was unbelievable. And 6 months is a long time. And we were out at the Holiday Inn in Navarre Beach, which had a huge holodome. I heard it's not there anymore. I heard a hurricane wiped it out.
There's a lot of things happen here that way.
Whoa, I get it. But it was, and Jaws 2 was, you know, nothing was going to top Jaws 1. But in Jaws 2, but you know, after a while I began to think, okay, I'm an actor with the last hired, the first fired. We're having a kid's third child. I'm on the corner selling flowers to feed my family and going around putting flyers on the doors. And I thought, it's got to be better than this. And a guy whose kid went to nursery school with one of my boys, said, you produced a theater, why don't you come see if you want to be a TV exec? And I thought, no. And Richard Dreyfuss, who was the godfather to one of my kids, my wife set me up. She said, Richard came over and said, if you don't do this, I will kill you. And I went in for the interviews, and they hired me. And within a year, I ran development. I developed the X-Files. I worked on The Simpsons. I mean, we did some really good stuff. We did a show called South Central, and I cast J-Lo. She was one of the fly girls in Living Color, and cast her as the cashier at the store, and it was just, I had a great time. And then I had an aptitude for it. You know, there's no facts here. It's all kind of opinions forcibly argued. And it was just heaven. Ex-actors make great execs. And being a producer is, it's kind of getting people to do what you want them to do and having them want to do it. It's like being a good camp counselor with some creative eyes in it, you know? It's kind of fun. I loved it.
So you jumped ahead, and I'm glad you.
Oh, sorry.
No, absolutely no, because it's our time. We do what we want with it. But talk about developing the X-Files and that time. I mean, that's.
Well, Chris Carter, who wrote it, had been done a few pilots, and none of them ever went. And then he started to think about unexplained phenomena. And it's the simplest formula, you know, unexplained phenomenon, and you have a believer and a non-believer, Mueller and Scully.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took off. And it was stunning. It was so good. And you know, hit shows that in those days that went into syndication paid for decades of failed pilots and failed series, and because they were such a gold mine at the end of the rainbow. It was crazy. But it was great to be able to help mold things, put people into projects, and I had an aptitude for it. I had an old friend who was an actor who then became an executive who was very successful, named Leslie Moonves, and he you know, blazed the way. And a lot of ex-actors either become writers or a few become executives and producers. But it has to be an actor who wasn't like counting how many lines they had, because that kind of mindset doesn't do well.
Do you have any projects that you worked on that you wish could have went off and didn't quite fly?
Yeah, because you care about them. They're your kids.
Oh, absolutely.
But one year, because I was David Kelly's producing partner, and we had The Practice and Ally McBeal. We won Best Comedy and Best Drama at the Emmys for, you know, twice. It was unbelievable to win both. Nobody's ever done it. I don't know if they ever will again, but it was unbelievable. And I had my mom there, and my kids. It was so exciting.
Let's see if, some questions from the audience here a little bit.
You just mentioned The Practice. Did you actually do some work on The Practice?
Oh, yeah.
Because me and my wife just watched the entire series again during the pandemic. We started with episode 1 and watched every season all the way to the end. So that's one of our favorite shows.
So let me tell you a funny story. So we knew David, we were going to do a show about a defense attorney. And we always talked about showing both sides of the issue. And sometimes what happens is the guilty walk. And we've done that and whatever. But David always wanted, this is a really interesting story because Dylan is here. David wanted the lead to be everyman. He wanted Oliver Platt to play the main role. Then Oliver didn't want to do it. He said, let's get Beau Bridges. He didn't want to do it. And I went to a dinner at the AFI, and there's Dylan McDermott, who had just done In the Line of Fire and Jersey Girls. And I went up to him and said, do you care about material? He says, yeah, it's everything in the world to me. So I said, then you owe it to yourself and your career to read this script. He says, I'll read it, I promise. Get it to my agent. The agent calls me and says, hey, everything you and your Mr. Kelly do doesn't stick to the ceiling. I said, he gave me his word he'd read this script. And he says, he's a movie star. I said, yeah, he just did Jersey Girls. What's he going to do, 49 more New Mexico girls, North Dakota girls? So he reads it and calls me a week later, Jeffery Kramer, yeah. I said, I love this script. And then he says to me, do you ever go into a bar in the village called Jimmy Dave's? I said, every night before I got off, when I got off the subway, I go in and have a drink or say hello to my friends. He said, do you remember Mac? I said, yeah, the bartender. I loved him. He's a great guy. He goes, that's my father. I said, whoa. He says, you're not going to remember this. You had just done Jaws. And you were like a star to me. And you came in one night. You're the biggest actor around. And I thought, are you blind? What's wrong with you? And he then, he says, we sat and talked. And I had been drinking and said, we sat and talked for hours about acting. And he was an underage busboy working in a bar that his dad was the bartender. And he said, you inspired me. I went home. I called my kids on the way home. I said, you always have to put it out there because you never know when it's going to come back to you, because Dylan ended up getting the role because I brought him in on it. And he became Dylan McDermott. It made him a star. And he's a very good actor. And we once walked into a restaurant in New York, and the table of women got up and started applauding. And I knew it wasn't for me. True story.
One of my favorite series of episodes in the practice is the ones with James Whitmore.
Oh, so that's a great story.
Yeah, with Raymond Oz.
When I was in high school, I was in a play that Robert Ludlum produced. Robert Ludlum, the writer, had a theater in a mall in Paramus, New Jersey. And I was in a play called Gideon, and James Whitmore was the star. I always liked him. And we had this guest shot, and I called Mr. Whitmore, and I said, Mr. Whitmore, you will win an Emmy from this. He goes, oh, kid, you can't say that to people. There's no way that kind of stuff is happening. And he came in, he did the role, and he won the Emmy.
Brilliant.
He was so good.
He really was.
Oh, he was so good. What an actor. His son became a director. He directed a lot of TV, James Whitmore Jr. But what a nice man, and I always liked him, and, kind of was very cool.
And he just seemed just a phenomenal actor. It's
Oh,
really-
boy, so good.
And playing such a, he played a judge who was, health was failing, his mind was going.
yeah.
It just was like, and it's, with us with grandparents and stuff, it's kind of close to home, and it's just, he was so amazing in that. So well casted.
We had Michael Bottaluco have an affair with a judge on there, and The Guilty Walk. Sometimes John Larroquette was on that, and he murdered someone, and he got off.
Yeah, we love those episodes with.
But they're very smart. David had a real unique ability to show two sides of an issue and twist it. It was really good. I was very proud of it. And that won a Golden Globes too, and so did Allie. And Allie, when we started, nobody knew it. And I called the head of the Hollywood Foreign Press and I said, we think this is a comedy because it's so much fun and funny. And he said, well, send it to me, let me see. And he called back and said, I think it's a comedy, enter it as a comedy, and we've won. And it put us on the map.
Well, that was a great show at a right time. It was so quirky. You're kind of post Friends, and you get.
And it was the the women's movement, and all of that. The timing was, part of it's timing, and part of it is luck or chance or fate or joss or whatever you want to call it. Who knows what's. Someone said, you're going to keep making hits. I said, if we knew how to do that, we'd keep doing it.
Other questions?
Back to Jaws, I've read how Dreyfuss and Shaw kind of butted heads. There was some tension on the set, and there were problems with Bruce, the mechanical shark. And I was just wondering if you had any other crazy problems or issues on the set that you remember.
Well, the shark didn't work. So they would write new scenes. I got more footage in there because of that. Others did too, because the shark never really worked well. Sometimes you know, salt water does things to sea that people didn't foresee, and even there, in those days, if you saw a sailboat in the background, you had to wait, and it took forever. It was way over budget, way over time. It was, and there were rumors always that they were going to pull the plug. They were, you know, and Universal was pretty supportive, though. They kept it going. And Jaws 2, I'm here down at one of the, I think it was in Destin, where the motorboat, the Amity police boat went out. And Sid Sheinberg, who was the head of Universal, was there with his wife, Lorraine Gary. And I'm in my uniform, and a woman comes up to me, and I'm talking to them, and I'm thinking, whoa. And the woman says, "Sir, you look so familiar." And I think, whoa. And she says, "Are you in a bowling league in town?" Sid Sheinberg laughed out loud, and his wife said, "I've never heard him roar like that." It was so funny. And then when I changed my life and I became an executive, one of the first things I did was call Sid Sheinberg and said, "Would you have lunch with me?" Okay. And for the first time in my life, and I'm 30 some odd years old, I never had an expense account in my life. I put down Sid Sheinberg, and my boss says, "Whoa, what bullshit. You had lunch with Sid Sheinberg?" And I said, "Yeah. You told me to meet people and use my expense account," because everybody would have loved it. He was the head of the studio, you know. It was kind of odd. A little quirky story.
You also worked, you had a part in Halloween too?
I did. I had a buddy named Rick Rosenthal who directed that, American Dreamer, with Tom Conti, and he put me in it. Who knew? People come in and have me sign Halloween and cool stuff. And, it's kind of crazy.
Stuff you didn't think about, like, back then.
Never. What did I work at? 2 days, you know?
Just wait till you get to cosplay, you're dressing up as you.
Oh, boy, yeah. Yeah.
What do you think is magical about producing? What do you love about it?
I think you have to have an eye for material and who can make this material sing the best. And most times it doesn't work, but sometimes it does. And those times that it does pays for all the misses. It's really, there's no rules, there's no facts here. It's all opinions forcibly argued, you know. It's kind of, it's in some ways the Wild Wild West. It's changed now with streamers. Streamers, you know, they have so much product, but you can't own your product anymore like you could on the network.
Right.
If they want to remake it in 10 years and it was a hit, they don't have to ask you. They don't have to pay you. We're going to see some strikes because actors are going to want residuals from streaming. That's, you know, it's kind of...
Well, we're already seeing that, the innovation.
Yeah.
They're in negotiation right now.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
Because animation writers are paid half,
Yeah,
more
for sure.
So yeah, absolutely. So I expect we'll see a lot of strikes.
Oh, I think it's going to be a real, and you'll see there won't be as many streaming companies. Yeah, CBS I think is probably somebody's going to buy it. Others will consolidate. There'll be 3, 4 maybe big ones.
Right.
And then boom. Kind of interesting.
What was your getting into producing? What was your biggest surprise?
That I could do this, you know, part of it's about confidence. And when I first started at Fox, within 3 weeks I went on a retreat. Barry Diller was running it. I learned more what not to do at Fox, except from Barry, who said, if you're not passionate about what you want to get made, it'll never work. You have to fight for what you want to. You really do sometimes. I have a new project I'm trying to fight for. It's just tough out there. I have a Netflix show that we're waiting to hear on, an NBC big Southern soap. It takes place in Beaufort, South Carolina. We call it Peachtree Bluff. But it's a big soap about secrets. 3 girls come home, see their mom, and the truth comes out that the father that they thought was their father wasn't. It was told to a young Southern writer on this woman's deathbed, and she said, you know, it's a secret, and you can write it if you want, and it's a series of novels called Peachtree Bluff. The Netflix one is really interesting. It's about a young girl who's so angry. She gets remanded by the courts to a VA program and meets a guy who trains her, and she becomes an MMA fighter. It's really good. So we'll see.
Your group has an interesting gamut of projects. And so, you have stuff with David Kelly and developing X-Files. And so, what projects move you for your father?
If they have a big conceit and mean something. I'll give you an example. I have a book called Revenge. And Revenge is a story, a true story. In the 1980s, Al Fatah was shooting tourists in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and they shoot a guy in the head, and it doesn't kill him, it grazes his head. His daughter, shooter's captured, is an Arab, young Arab. The daughter is a reporter at the Washington Post, and she is so incensed, she wants revenge. And she goes around the world. She goes to Albania. They have a book on revenge that is specific. If someone does this, here's the punishment. She went to the mullahs in Iran who said, if your father were a woman, the punishment would be greater. Why? Because women have more hair. Truth. She went to the mafia about revenge. She went to Israel. Finally, she goes undercover in Gaza, befriends the shooter's family, and tells them she's a reporter writing a book on revenge. They fall in love with her. They want to name a grandchild after her. And she smuggles letters in by the brothers, saying, sorry for what you did, why violence? And eventually, 10 years later, they're going to let him out of prison, maybe. There's a hearing because he's got severe asthma. And she breaks into this hearing. They don't want her to speak, and she just forces her way in and divulges who she is, and her revenge is to forgive him. Now, I want to do this because I think if people think like this, and you can follow this girl from revenge to forgiveness, any intractable problem in the world becomes potentially solvable with some forgiveness.
Absolutely. Yes.
And what a difference that could make in the world. That's kind of the kind of stuff.
It's a compelling story, too.
Yeah, I get it.
And so,
It's so hard to get this one made.
I wish you luck. I hope you get it made. I'm excited to see it. I'd be like, I remember when he was pitching. I can't wait to see it. Other questions?
Before the guys get on the boat and leave on Jaws,
Yeah.
and they're out, you don't really see much of anybody else after that. I thought that you and Roy Scheider's scenes were really good, that you had a good, interaction between the two of you. You were kind of crazy, scrambling around, trying to make signs for the beach and this stuff, and he was trying to stay level
And
headed.
some of that's improvised, what's the matter with my printing? And let Polly do the printing. Then, it's kind of fun.
What was Roy Scheider like in real life? I was always a fan of his.
In Jaws 1, he was a lovely guy. Jaws 2, he didn't really want to do this. And, he was not the same supportive guy.
Was it just because he was on the contract to do it and he had to do it?
Richard didn't do it, Steven didn't do it. And Richard said something to me interesting today, because Richard said, do you realize how much money these guys made? He said, we all did this for basically nothing. I think it was $50,000 or whatever. And he said, do you think that Zanuck and Brown ever gave us a bonus? No. And I spoke on behalf of Zanuck and Brown once at a film festival, and I had a friend who wrote me a line that said, you got to hand it to two guys who pulled millions out of the water without even getting wet. And I thought, oh, that's great. Great.
I think that the problems you talked about, where you had scenes added because there were problems with the shark. When they always talk about where you don't see the shark, that much, that really worked out for me.
Oh, I get it, but I'd show up sometimes on Jaws too, and Roy would say, you know, I rewrote the scene, and not necessarily he'd be in it. And David Brown and John Smark, I'd look over and they'd go, and put me back in it.
Can you go back and watch your own stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty critical. But yeah, I don't, it's been a long time since I've seen Jaws and Jaws 2. My kids watch it more than I do. I have a new granddaughter, but she's 4 months old, so it's too young to watch.
You have a little time, you.
So somebody, Caitlin will tell you, some guy came in with a 2-year-old who had seen it. I said, I should call social services on you. You let a 2-year-old see Jaws? Give me a break.
I first saw it at 4 at daycare.
No!
There's 4 at daycare, and they had 2 rooms, and they had a room where they showed movies, and so the 4 and 5-year-olds watched the movies, and then they had the little kids room, and then the thing was, if you got too scared, you could go to the little kids room, but none of us were like,
Whoa,
scared.
4 years
So that was
old.
4, clear memories. The first time I saw Jaws was 4. Loved it. I loved it.
Somebody else told us babysitters made them watch Halloween and
Friday
stuff.
the 13th.
Yeah, very young, very young. That's why I never liked stuff that really scared me.
What kind of stuff do you like? I mean, I know.
I love things like, I watch Ozark, I love Succession, I think it's smart. I watch, there's a lot of series on Sundance that I watch. You know, some of the stuff on Apple. I don't watch broadcast much anymore. I mean, it's the same thing, you know.
How we see it, SVUs and things we can get. It's basically.
I get it. I said, Dylan, what'd they do? Drive a Brinks truck up to your house to get them to do another season?
Anybody else?
So were you still on the practice, when the main cast started, you know, they
Changing?
Yeah, and then they just said.
Well, that year I left. I went to and ran a Billionaires company, who I thought, we produced a Broadway play, Sweet Smell of Success, made a couple of small movies, and that lasted 3 years, maybe 4 at most. And then I've been at CBS developing, and then I couldn't get on the air. You can't get on the air at CBS without an acronym in your name. FBI, CSI, NCIS. I mean, and then within a month, in 2020, after my deal didn't get renewed, May of 2020, that's when we sold the MMA thing to Netflix, and so there were markets at least, but you don't get paid until they shoot as a producer, unless you have an overall deal at a studio or whatever. But, so it's a long time between dollars.
Oh, in the back.
Yes.
All right, so just listening to you speak, you seem to be very passionate and very humble about, you know, everything that you've done in your career. Was there ever a time where you kind of had to break out the character to really get things done, to get things that you wanted done, for example? And did you ever feel bad, or not bad, but did you ever feel kind of, I guess the word bad is fine, we can use that, about how you had to act just to get things done, just because of how passionate about it?
I was always above board. You know, I didn't start till late because I was an actor forever.
Yeah.
But I was always grateful that I could do this. I'm grateful to be here. The idea that somebody pays me to sign this is, I couldn't be grateful for it. And I'm telling you, I get a charge out of it. I haven't done one for 2.5 years probably, and I don't do maybe most ever 1 or 2 a year. But it rejuvenates you. It makes you think that what you've done is validated to some degree. But you know what? I think I was never that aggressive, creepy guy who pushed and hurt other people to get things done. I would have been more successful perhaps, but
That's like the.
I
concept
never
of it.
did it.
Yeah.
Just never did. I was raised by women, boy, and you know, it's all good.
Well, that response makes me feel a lot better about the mindset that's happening lately.
But it's tough out there, and there's
It
some
is.
who are just creeps, and you know, I had an assistant who I said, look, if we set things up, I'll try to help you. I'll try to get you a credit, and if I can, try to get you a little more money. Then we set something up, and then she wanted half of what I get. And I thought, you never produced anything. I mean, where's your gratitude here?
Yeah, exactly. And
And it hurt my feelings. I was really bugged me. I thought, you know, you misjudged the character.
yeah. I appreciate your response.
Yeah, thank you. That's a
Absolutely.
good question.
Well, we appreciate you coming to, and sharing your time here.
Happy
coming
to do it.
Pensacon. And, you know, you have definitely entertained us in your acting career. Definitely, you produced some great shows that we all love.
I had a good time, and some of them we told Dylan today, we did a pilot that never went with Chris Maloney, where he was I always remember one line from it. He's a dad, 3 little kids. He comes in, and 3 little kids, 3 boys like me, said, Daddy, I want this, I want this. He goes, hey, I worked, you ate, we're even. Did these little tykes, it just killed me.
Too bad they get picked up. We'll
Oh,
enjoy that
I
too.
But Dylan and I have been great friends ever since the practice.
One last question before we leave, because you mentioned that, you know, after CBS you went and produced some films and you did the Broadway. What do you love about that? What's different about that for you?
Well, I started in the theater, so it always was fun. And Broadway is fun. You know, writers have more power on Broadway than in any other medium.
It's true.
It's really interesting. And, you know, John Lithgow called me as I was running this billionaires company and says, Jeffrey, we just lost $1 million. Because when I was I guess I was just graduated college. When I was 21, John and I competed for a Fulbright, and he got it. And we've just been friends since we were very young. And we ended up doing Santa Claus the movie together.
Yeah.
And he called me and said, we just lost $1 million. And I went into these billionaires and they said, okay, we want to be on Broadway, here it is. The other old producers used to go, whoa, how did you do this? I mean, they killed people for $100,000, whatever they killed. I got $1 million and we produced this. John won the Tony, it was really good. John Ware wrote the book, Marvin Hamlish did the music. It was really an interesting show, but you couldn't redeem a hero who killed somebody in the first act. It's based on the movie A Sweet Smell of Success. And it just didn't work. So then this family that gave $1 million said, okay, let's get Outflow in here. They called me Outflow because they lost all their money.
Well, we'll leave it there.
All right. This has
Everyone,
been
thank you
great.
for coming and give it up for Jeffery here. Thank you. You can catch him tomorrow and Sunday at the 6 Center. You can go.